So, um, when a trial as high profile as the Sean Diddy Combs case hits the news, you want to cut through the headlines, right?
Yeah.
Understand what's really happening.
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking for the real substance and all the noise.
That's exactly where we come in.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into, well, the very first day of the sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy trial against Sean Diddy Combs.
Right. And we've got some pretty detailed sources to work with here, excerpts from ABC News coverage, basically a transcript analyzing everything that went down on day one.
Yeah, and our mission really is to pull out the most significant developments, the key arguments, those little moments from court that tell you something.
And give you that clarity without getting, like, totally bogged down in legal jargon.
Exactly. Context without the confusion.
Okay, so day one, it kicks off with opening statements naturally. Sounds like the prosecution came out pretty strong.
Oh, absolutely. They immediately tried to set up this contrast, this kind of Jekyll and Hyde thing with Combs. The public persona, Puff Daddy, Diddy, Love, the successful mogul, but they argued that behind closed doors, he was controlling, manipulative, violent.
And they actually used the phrase criminal enterprise.
They did, calling him the head of a criminal enterprise. That's very deliberate language.
Wow. And what did they say this enterprise did?
Well, the claim is that Combs used his inner circle, his team, to coerce women
Coerce them into what?
into drug-fueled sexual encounters, sometimes lasting for days, apparently. They even had names for them: freak-offs or wild king nights.
Freak-offs. That's disturbing terminology to hear in a federal court.
Definitely grabs your attention. So yeah, very serious allegations right from the start.
Okay, so how did the defense respond to that in their opening?
Well, the defense took a slightly different angle. They conceded Combs is complicated, a complicated man.
Complicated, but
But they insisted the case isn't complicated. They tackled that video head on, the one of him attacking Cassie Ventura.
the one everyone's seen.
Right. They said, look, that shows domestic violence. It's disturbing. But, and this is the key part, they argued it's not sex trafficking. It's not racketeering conspiracy.
Ah, so they're drawing a line. Admitting the violence, but saying it doesn't fit the specific charges he's facing.
Precisely. They basically said, yes, he could be violent. Yes, he led a, quote, swingers lifestyle with consensual threesomes. But that's not the crime here.
So separating the man's behavior, however bad, from the legal definition of these federal charges.
That seems to be the core strategy, yeah. Damage control on the character front, but legal defense on the specific counts.
Got it. Now, this being such a huge case, everyone's watching Combs himself. What was his demeanor like in court, and who was there supporting him?
Well, initially, reports said he seemed pretty composed, even all smiles coming in.
Really? Smiles?
Yeah, interacting with his mom, his kids. They were there in the courtroom, apparently blowing kisses, making gestures, trying to project some normalcy, perhaps.
But that didn't last all day, right? I heard his mood shifted.
It did, particularly during the testimony from the male escort.
Okay, what was that about?
This was about the alleged forced sexual encounter involving Cassie Ventura, and specifically the detail that Combs allegedly masturbated in the corner while it happened.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and during that part, Combs reportedly became impassive, just sort of shut down, pushed his chair back, crossed his legs, a noticeable physical shift.
And I read his daughters left the room during that testimony.
Right, they stepped out, which, it really highlights the graphic nature of some of the testimony and the impact it has, not just on him, but on his family sitting right there.
Absolutely. So, speaking of testimony, the first actual witness was Israel Flores, the former hotel security guard.
Correct. His testimony was all about that March 5th, 2016 incident at the Intercontinental Hotel.
The incident from the video.
The very same one. He testified he got a call about a woman in distress, 6th floor.
And when he got there, what did he see?
He described Combs sitting there with a, quote, devilish stare, his words.
Devilish stare.
And he said Cassie Ventura looked clearly shaken, which, aligns with the situation.
Did he talk about the video itself?
He did. He actually walked the jury through the security footage. Some was played by the prosecutors, and apparently Flores had also recorded some parts on his own phone back then.
Really? On his phone?
Yeah. And he described what was happening in the footage. Ventura in blue pants, hoodie, no socks, putting socks on near the elevator. Then Combs comes barreling around the corner, knocks her down from behind, hard, and then stomps on her.
So his testimony directly backs up what's seen on that tape.
Exactly. It puts a human voice and observation to the images, reinforcing that incident for the jury right at the start. Seems like the prosecution wanted to anchor that reality early on.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
There were also comments about Combs' appearance in court generally.
Yeah, a few observations. His hair and beard are noticeably grayer, which is attributed to, well, being incarcerated and not being able to dye it. Also looked thinner than when he was first arrested, less bloated than in some other recent court appearances.
And his expression during the prosecution's opening.
Remained impassive, according to reports, just taking it in.
Okay. Now, ultimately, this all comes down to the jury. What do we know about the people deciding this case?
It's 8 men and 4 women.
Okay. Any details on who they are?
We have some professions. It's quite a mix, actually. A massage therapist, a retired telephone lineman, a social worker, someone from a nonprofit, a nursing home worker, an investment analyst, logistic analyst, and even a scientist. So a real range of backgrounds.
That is diverse. Any thoughts on how that mix or maybe their ages could play into things?
Well, age was mentioned. Apparently, several jurors are over 50.
And the thinking there is.
From the defense side, maybe, just maybe, they hope older jurors might have more, let's say, traditional views on relationships or consent. Could make them question the coercion aspect.
Interesting angle.
But also, the trial is expected to last 8 weeks. That's a huge commitment. So the jury pool itself was probably limited to people who could actually do that.
Right. Practicalities matter. So jury selection must have been intense. Both sides trying to get jurors they think favor their narrative.
Oh, absolutely. Standard practice. The defense wants jurors they think will be skeptical, fair, maybe lean towards separating the bad acts from the specific charges.
And the prosecution.
They're looking for people they believe, based on questioning, will see the pattern they're alleging, connect the dots, and ultimately convict. It's a strategic game.
Okay, let's talk about the players, the legal teams. Who's representing Combs?
It's a fairly high-profile defense team. Mark Geragos is a big name. You might remember him from the XM radio case.
Right.
His daughter, Tenny Geragos, is also on the team. Alexander Shapiro is handling appellate stuff. Then there's Brian Steele.
He was involved in the Young Thug trial, wasn't he?
That's him. Plus Xavier Donaldson, Anna Jason, and Linda. So it's a sizable team. They're well-resourced.
And on the prosecution side, who's leading the charge for the government?
It's the Southern District of New York, SDNY. They have a famously high conviction rate, like 90–95%.
Wow. That's formidable.
It is. The interim U.S. attorney is Jay Clayton, but the prosecutor you're seeing in court, a key one, is Maureen Comey.
Comey, as in James Comey's daughter.
The very same. And interestingly, it's an all-women prosecution team leading this case.
An all-women team prosecuting these specific charges. That feels significant.
It could be perceived that way, certainly. Maybe aiming for a particular resonance, given the allegations and the alleged victims.
Okay, so thinking about the prosecution strategy, starting with the security guard, the male escort.
Yeah.
What does that tell us about their game plan?
It looks like they're carefully laying groundwork, establishing the 2016 incident, getting that video evidence front and center with witness testimony. That seems crucial.
Setting the scene before bringing in bigger witnesses.
Exactly. Calling the male escort early also strongly suggests they're building towards Cassie Ventura, testifying about that alleged forced encounter. They want to establish a pattern of control and coercion first.
To make her testimony even more powerful when it comes.
Precisely. She's clearly positioned as, maybe victim number 1 in their narrative, a central figure.
And there was talk about her pregnancy maybe affecting the timing.
Yeah, that came up. Just the logistics of having a pregnant person testify, it might mean she's called sooner rather than later. Her husband was reportedly seen leaving the courthouse, which added to that speculation.
So do you put your star witness on early or build up to it? Always a tough call.
It is. There's the recency effect, what the jury hears last sticks. But there's also frequency hearing things repeatedly. They're weighing all that.
Let's swing back to the defense opening. What was their main play there?
It really seemed to be about conceding the undeniable to gain credibility on the deniable.
Meaning?
Meaning they directly addressed that horrific, traumatic, violent tape, as they called it. They didn't try to excuse it.
So they acknowledged the tape is bad.
Right. To show they're not completely dismissing reality, but then pivot hard. Say, okay, that happened. It was awful. Domestic violence. But
it's not sex trafficking or racketeering.
Exactly. That's the line they're drawing. He might be a, quote, bad person in that moment, but he is not guilty of these specific federal crimes.
So it's all about that distinction trying to keep the jury focused narrowly on the elements of the actual charges.
Precisely. They had a reasonable doubt that Combs ran an enterprise to sexually exploit people through force, fraud, or coercion. That's a high bar.
And what is that burden of proof, legally speaking?
Well, the prosecution has to prove every single element of every charge. The racketeering, the coercion, the sex trafficking, beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest standard in U.S. law.
So the defense just needs to create that reasonable doubt about any key element.
Essentially, yes. Their strategy seems to be frame Combs' actions, even the bad ones, as private behavior, maybe immoral, maybe even illegal in other ways, but not fitting the definition of federal racketeering and sex trafficking.
The challenge for the prosecution is connecting the dots, then, between the violence or lifestyle and an actual criminal enterprise.
That's the crux of it. Showing it wasn't just isolated bad acts, but part of an organized, coercive scheme involving other people for the purpose of sex trafficking. That's the leap they need the jury to make.
Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the public interest is just off the charts, isn't it? Lines, people trying to sell seats.
It's really quite something. That detail about someone trying to scalp a seat for $350, I mean, wow.
You hear about interest in celebrity trials like Chris Brown back in 2009, but selling seats? That feels different.
It does. It speaks volumes about the public's intense fascination, maybe even obsession, with seeing perceived justice or just witnessing the downfall of someone so famous and powerful.
And does the verdict, whatever it is, even matter for his reputation at this point? It feels like so much damage is already done.
That's a really good question. There's a feeling of, we know too much already. The tape, the allegations.
Right.
So even if he gets a not guilty verdict on these specific federal charges, public perception might remain heavily influenced by everything else that's come out. There could be a real disconnect.
Well, it's clear day one just set the stage. This is going to be a long, complex, and incredibly high-stakes trial. As we wrap up this deep dive for today, what are the absolute key takeaways?
Okay, so number one, the prosecution painting Combs as this criminal mastermind, this Jekyll and Hyde figure. Number two, the defense admitting the violence on tape but fiercely denying it meets the bar for the federal charges. Number three, that early testimony from the security guard, locking in the reality of that 2016 hotel incident. Number four, getting a glimpse of the jury, 8 men, 4 women, diverse backgrounds. And finally, the hints of legal strategy from both sides.
And huge anticipation for future witnesses, especially Cassie Ventura.
Definitely. Her potential testimony looms large.
Okay, so this is obviously just the start, and it leaves us, and you listening, with a lot to think about. Here's a final thought. Considering everything from day one, that diverse jury, the violence Combs' own lawyers admit to, how might those jurors process the really complex charges, like racketeering? Does the admitted behavior make it easier or harder to believe the bigger conspiracy?
And beyond the courtroom, what does this intense public frenzy, regardless of the verdict, really say about us? About celebrity, power, accountability, and maybe what we expect from the justice system in these huge public cases?